There, I'm Jay, Vintage Auto Garage. I'm here to talk about installing a Delco 10SI alternator and a 3-wire connection, and also how to measure the belt so you can figure out the right pulley. Okay, so let's start out with the right pulley size. So to figure out the pulley, you want to measure the cross section of your belt. Okay, so this belt is a 5/8 inch. So that means you want to have a 5/8 inch pulley here, okay? In this case, this is a 5/8 or 3/4. So this will run either a 5/8 or 3/4 inch belt. It'll run either one, okay? So belts and pulleys, there's a 3/8, which you'll find on later models after 1950 or so. You'll see those were narrow belts. There's 5/8, which this one is, which is a wider belt. And then there's 3/4, which you'll find in trucks and some other older vehicles used a very wide 3/4 belt. And of course, in that case, you have to have a 3/4 pulley. There were 1/2 inch belts. There are 1/2 inch belts. However, the only vehicle I think you're going to find a 1/2 inch belt on is a Thunderbird. Ford, for some reason, used 1/2 inch pulleys, 1/2 inch belts in Thunderbirds, okay? Other than that, it's 3/8, 5/8, or 3/4. And you know, it's particularly when the belt gets older, when you measure it, a lot of times you'll think that you have a 1/2 inch belt. So you have to look real close and you'll see that it's larger than a 1/2 inch. Okay, so unless you're working on a Thunderbird, it's probably a 5/8 inch, okay? All right, so that's the pulley. So now let's talk about how to connect up a 3-wire connection on the back of this alternator. So on the back of the alternator, we have the output, which is the little red insulator here. This is the ground, which we'll talk about here a little bit. And then this is the regulator connection, two little pins for the regulator, all right? This regulates the output voltage and current to the back of the alternator, to the output of the alternator. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is take the output wire. This is what goes to the battery, because remember, these take battery voltage to work. If you don't have battery voltage, these will not work. And then make sure that you use a heavy gauge wire. This is a 10 gauge wire with automotive jacket, so don't use cheap wire for the output. And then this goes directly to the plus side of your battery. And you can connect it to the plus side of the battery if you can connect it there. A lot of times it's not an easy connection, so you should then take it to the start solenoid, which goes directly to the plus side of the battery, or right down to the starter, which usually has a starter cable going the plus side of that, and so that way you have a good connection from the plus side of the battery right to the output of the alternator, because these take battery voltage for them to operate. Okay. Next thing we're going to do on a 3-wire setup, so we're going to call it 3-wire because this is 1 wire, the white wire is the 2nd wire, and the red wire is the 3rd. Okay, so that's why we call it a 3-wire system. All right, so we're going to plug this plug. This is our P10SI plug. Goes right in the back, right into the regulator, and we're going to take the red wire that comes off of that, and we're going to connect it right to the back, right to the output, okay? So what this does is when the alternator's operating, it will send, it'll send the voltage into the regulator, and it'll regulate the output, okay? So that's what this is, a sense wire. Okay, this white wire is actually the excite wire. What it means is it's gonna excite the alternator so it runs, okay? So I don't wanna get too technical, but an alternator requires voltage for it to actually operate. Unlike a generator, it doesn't require any voltage to operate. So a generator will charge a dead battery. An alternator will not charge a dead battery. So you always have to have a good, fully charged battery for an alternator to work, okay? But once you got a fully charged battery and the alternator is connected upright, it will keep your battery fully charged. And it'll keep it fully charged at low speeds and RPM. That's the other beauty of it. Okay, so this white wire is going to deliver 12 volts into the regulator. So this wire, this side here is going to connect either to your key switch, the run side of your key switch, or you can connect it to the plus side of the coil, which is in the same place, right? I mean, it's the same wire from, it takes 12 volts to your coil for your ignition system to work. So then you can tap off of there if you want. If you're using a Pertronic system, they require full 12 volts, and we recommend, if you're going to use Pertronics in your in your ignition system, that you run this right to the key switch. So that way you've got 12 volts going right into the regulator. Okay, now all of our P10SI plugs have this little lump in here, and what this is a diode, and a diode is just an electrical one-way check valve. So you can think about it that the voltage is only going to run from your key switch or your coil down into the alternator, not the other way. And the reason that you don't want it to go the other way and have this one-way check valve is that in older cars where you only have an on and off switch and you don't have a modern, 3-position with a neutral, if you don't have a diode in there and you turn the switch off, it's likely that the alternator will keep the coil in the ignition system hot, meaning that the engine won't shut off. So if you install one of these and you don't have a diode in there and you can't shut the engine off, it's because this excite wire doesn't have a diode in it. Okay, so all of ours that we send out all have this diode. That's what that lump is, and it's going, the voltage is going into the regulator and not the other way. Okay, so now we have our 3-wire connection: one to the battery, one to the key switch, and then the sense wire. Okay, and then we have another wire here connected to ground. I mean, again, you can use a piece of the 10-gauge wire, put a couple connectors on it, and run it over to ground. That way you know that the alternator is well grounded. Don't rely on the bracketry to ground these, because sometimes there's grease. They could be powder coated, which is is an insulator in itself. So make sure that you run a separate ground. All right, so now you have the alternator hooked up. You know that you've got your battery connection, you've got your plug connection. So before we start it, we're going to take a reading with a voltmeter between here and ground. Okay, so this will be battery voltage. So this should read, a fully charged battery is 12.6 volts, not 12 volts, not 12.1. It should be 12.6. So when you buy a new battery, sometimes when you bring them home, you'll think that it's a fully charged battery. Well, unless they're 12.6, they're not. So a 12-volt battery is actually completely discharged. So there's not a lot of kind of headroom in between a fully charged battery and a dead battery. So you're going to test here, make sure that you've got 12.6. You'll be good to go. All right, so go ahead and start the engine and rev it up a little bit. Now take your voltage and check it here, and you should be reading about 14.1 to 14.5. These regulators are set somewhere, that's the tolerance. So at 14.1, 14.5, that's the output. And the reason why it's 14 versus 12 is because you need 2 more volts to charge a battery. You can't, if it just was, 12 volts or 12.6 volts, it would not charge the battery. So it has to have a couple more volts over to be able to charge the battery. So as long as you have 14 volts coming out of here, then you know that you're good to go. All right. You can also take a pocket knife, and when you have it running, carefully just come and put a pocket knife on the back of that bearing, and you're going to feel a little magnetic pull back here, and that means that it's charging okay. If you don't have any magnetic pull, it means it's not charging. You want to shut it off, or if you check this and it's still battery voltage, then you have something hooked up wrong. And don't run this if you're not getting 14 volts here. It means you probably don't have a good ground. And the alternator is going to look for a ground, and it's just going to, it's going to continue to try to find a ground and put out, the voltage and the current. And if you run it too long that way, you will damage the diodes that are in here and the regulator. So make sure that you do have the 14 volts. Make sure again that it's grounded. And I mean, it's extremely simple. Okay, so that's how you hook up a Delco 10SI 3-wire system. If you have any questions, you can reach us at vintageautogarage.com. And thanks for watching.